I had gone looking for items. This is November 26th, Friday, I guess. Let's see. Yeah, no. No, it's Saturday, so it is the 26th. I'm sorry, it's November 26th, Saturday, 2022. I showed you the green notebook, classic notebook. In 1984, I had to do an internship to get my bachelor's. I was in the Army Reserves temporarily, and I had bought land in Middleburg. I figure some people paid 54 for parking, though I would pay $54 to get an acre of land, which I kept for 10 or 12 years. And when I sold it for 12,000. The original cost I think was 5,400. So it did make a profit, but my dad thought, well, you could make more money in a mutual fund, and I had some of those too. Anyway, someone from Romania or Czech, they said, promise that you tell what you read. I read it. It was very depressing. I was doing 90 hours a week, 40-hour job at IRS downtown. Had to go to UNF. I think I had to do 210 hours or some number of hours from July to November. And I had been dating a professor. I was not in his classes. It was, you know, he was 12 years older than I, and it didn't mean half as much to him as it did to me. So I had drove down to Edgewater because he worked for the Defense Investigative Agency also. And I went to Edgewater, and he was no longer there. And I said, "Oh well, this is I'm going too far. It's south of Daytona." I drove home, and for some reason, I was on Phillips Highway, and I was at J. Turner Butler, and there was a barricade there. And I look in my rearview mirror. I think, well, there's a black guy coming up in a Monte Carlo because it looked like a Monte Carlo. Well, no, it was a woman whose family owned a deli. I think her last name was Dolores King or something. And she had a Grand Prix, like a 1972, 74 Grand Prix. And I was in my little red Pinto. And I just got new shock absorbers and tires. And I don't even know, I only had 36,000 miles on it. Maybe even 3,600, I don't know. Luckily, it was after the fire hazard. But anyway, she crammed into it. I got knocked out. And I remember thinking about Dr. Gerson, and I seen stars. And I was knocked about 40 feet down the road. And the policeman came, and her car was totaled too. She just went right through the red light, just crammed ass full speed. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've been drinking." And I was doing that internship, and I pulled her thing up. I shouldn't have, but I pulled it up, and it said she was driving on a suspended license for other DUIs. And anyway, later that night, 3 Navy guys had gotten killed because they ran right over that barricade, or guardrail or whatever. I don't know. I think there was a guardrail there. They went off of JTB into the woods, and they were intoxicated. Apparently, the whole area is. I think she had been at the lady that hit me. I think she had been at a Army Navy. What do they call it? A BFW post. "Oh, I'm sorry. I've been drinking." And I'd never been knocked out before, so that was depressing. Working 40 hours at IRS, 20 or more at UNF, and then my Army Reserve stuff. Some weeks I was doing 90 hours. I can see reason to be kind of tired, and I was resentful. Also, the professor that was a doctor, doctoral, to try to get this internship done, he was a radical from the 60s, and he wanted stuff on the police department. He was like always fighting for better buildings, fighting to get rid of mold, fighting to find out if there's corruption in this very small 10 or 15 unit police department. And I was resentful because I didn't even be doing it. When I first set up my BA, there wasn't an internship. Now there's an internship, and I got to get through that to get my bachelor's, which I'm not going to go back to police work. I was at IRS, and I enjoyed IRS. I wasn't going back. Anyway, I got through it. But one night, and there were deers because there was a dinner dairy. There was a Skinner's dairy that was abandoned, and it was a wooded area. Basically, at that time, UNF was surrounded by woods. So there might be rattlesnakes. There were boar hogs. There were wild pigs, I guess. And there were deers. And I had seen 2 or 3 deers late at night one time. Anyway, so you figure there were meteor showers in August. And then there were meteor showers in late November. My thing lasted to November. In that entire diary, I did not write it, but I did write about the red light. It was an Officer Kaufman, Kaufman, Man. I don't know his first name. He has a very pie shape, curly hair, a husky guy. Uh, but he did chew tobacco, and they read out. I got all the names of officers that work there, and they didn't like me, and I didn't want to be doing this, but I wrote a lot of notes because Stanley Schwartz wanted me to write all the notes on these people. What kind of equipment? What do they do? What were they? And I knew all of it. I'd worked police work before. So we had NCIC. They had a radio. They had a lot of driving tickets. People didn't have stickers. People shouldn't have been on the campus, and people were making out in the trails, and all this. Or people were intoxicated by the boathouse. These type of things. They also had weddings and business seminars. Back then, you could like rent the auditorium, and they had business seminars, wedding, fun run. They used to have the swoop the loop. What was called. It was a 5K out there, and I think even going that far back, they had a fun run. So I was writing all this stuff down. Anyway, there's the meteor shower, and I'm riding with Kaufman, and we were in the parking lot across, not far from the boathouse, and I think we saw a meteor. And he started talking about if you're on a highway and you're writing your reports, you use a little red light on your flashlight. Instead of using the bright white light, you cover it with a red cover like marine or something. Now, it can be seen, but it doesn't draw the eye to you. So if you're an erratic driver over on the loop, they're not going to notice you writing your flashlight's pointing down to the page where you're writing, okay? Maybe you hold it in your lips, you're putting that flashlight down towards the page. Well, that color light red is not as observable to a passing motorist or passing person. They have to really study on it to notice the red light versus the white light. So at that point, for some reason, I told him the story of the encounter with Bundy. And I don't know if he remembers it, but I'm sitting there reading it, and it brought back, I had too much going on. Army Reserves, full-time job, and the internship and the car that was totaled, the concussion. My mother helped by getting another Pinto, which wasn't a really good idea because it wouldn't go over 35 miles an hour, And I never did pay her that $600 back, I don't think. God bless Mom, but no, it was kind of depressing. But you're right; it's not in the book. I read every page of it, and it was a hard time for me because there were weddings and babies, and people were having. I was 30 years old. I wasn't married. I didn't have children. It was very depressing. The guy that I dated or people that I liked were a little bit too old for me, and it's just it's a hard time for a woman when you don't have kids and you realize you're probably not going to have kids, and it's just a very hard time. And then getting knocked out. I mean, come on, even now, I don't know if that may affect me. But anyway, that was a story. So, yeah, it's not in that. So I do have a little diary, and in my own intellectual way, I'm able to see what appears to be college. The first word I see is college. And then I'm able to dig out bright red, talking to, and there's a really scrubbed out version with TH, then a lot of little spaces, and then a B, and then at the end a drop like a G or a Y. So I may have written his word, Theodore Bundy. Debbie had me rip that page out. She didn't want our parents to find out we rode with this guy. And a lot of people say, well, you don't know. I know exactly who it was. My issue all along has been somebody could find out about the defense scholarship that they had for science, math, foreign languages, including Chinese and Russian, and he got a free full ride scholarship for 8 weeks. And he had dropped out of Puget, was going to Washington, was getting ready to go to Washington. So I assume there might have been some kind of transfer. Yeah, who knows what that sneaky ass bastard did? He was here. Oh, I wanted to talk about a topic. I had a not so near to well Uncle Otto, Carl, up in Philadelphia, and he had come down a couple times. What is that disease? I think he had hepatitis. Or anyway, it wasn't good. But anyway, he got paralyzed and he eventually died. And he had a good heart, but he had a problem with alcohol. So he would be around the bars and clubs and maybe even get, arrested a few times but he came to visit Mom. And I remember the first time I ever heard about this, there were people, they call them pillowcase thieves. So they would come to resort areas, and for some reason it was easy to pickpocket, to go into motels and cars that people were busy going to the beach and leave their car, all the kids taking the stuff down at the beach, and maybe their cars unattended. And there would be groups of 2 or 3, 4 guys, and they would come down, make some money, and then head back to Philadelphia. Now, he wasn't part of that, but he was aware of it because of the clubs and bars he went to and his occasional probably incarceration for drinking. He wasn't a burglar. He worked for Scott Paper. He was okay. He just had a problem with alcohol. But I'm saying, I then later at JSO, I heard the same thing. There were troops of prostitutes that would go up and down the East Coast, and they had, I can't remember what they called it, but there was like tourism thieves. They would come down. What they call them now? What do they call that? Grifters and highwaymen, or whatever you call them. They basically come down to resort areas and look for open cars, open motel rooms. I guess maybe open motel rooms make sense back in the 60s and 70s because you're so excited to be going off to, the strip at Daytona or wherever, that somebody could walk along that motel syrup, and if the people were going for breakfast or something, then they get the purse in their bag, whatever they left behind. So they would do that and get a whole load, and then they would hit the road. Just like when they used to sell the cheap cigarettes in North Carolina and bring them down to Florida, whatever. So, yeah, I think they call it pillowcase now, but it wasn't called that. It was like grifters and carpetbaggers, thieves, I don't know what you call it. And I think Bundy, not only was he probably trying to imitate the wealthier kids and have a spring break, but he may have also overheard that, he could pick up some funds or something. Anyway, and he picked a red Volkswagen because his girlfriend had a red Mustang. Okay, thank you.